We've built a society dependent on plastic, but it's damaging our lands and our oceans, posing a serious threat to marine life. With an estimated 8 million tonnes of plastic entering our oceans every year, a panel of influential leaders discussed the steps needed to turn off the tap on plastic. For this conversation, I was joined by His Serene Highness Prince Albert II of Monaco, whose foundation strives to act as an accelerator for innovative solutions tackling major environmental issues. Marco Lambertini, Director General at the World Wildlife Fund. Bea Perez, Senior Vice President and Chief Communications, Public Affairs, Sustainability and Marketing Assets Officer at the Coca-Cola Company. Diego Donoso, President of Packaging and Specialty Plastics in the Materials Science Division at Dow Chemical. And Brune Poisson, Secretary of State to the Minister for the Ecological and Inclusive Transition of France. I'm Tania Bryer, and this is the Davos debate, turning off the tap on plastic. Well, thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. It's obviously a very important, crucial topic. Al Gore yesterday said it's a global emergency. Marco, would you agree with that?
I do. And we have evidence every day of the outrage that this has sparked in a very short period of time in society. I mean, it's amazing what happened on plastic, the awareness, the reaction. It is astonishing. And I think one reflection to start with is we had discovered recently that actually plastic is not just an issue about it. We thought it was an aesthetic issue. Plastic was ugly on the beach, in the street, in the environment. It's actually dangerous. And that's where people are moving from a rage for an aesthetic reaction to actually a rage for, because they're worried, they're concerned. Yes. We have a number of problems, challenges, and potential solution with plastic. I mean, the first one clearly is, I feel, our society has an addiction problem with plastic. We're using too much plastic. There is an excess of plastic that can be cut out straight away from the system without nobody really noticing, frankly. I came across sugar cubes for my cappuccino wrapped up singularly in plastic. Yeah. I mean, really? We need that?
How do we change the attitude,
well,
Marco?
That's a question of consumer behavior that has to be, however, extended to the producer's responsibility as well. And I know that the people on the panel agree with that, but that's fundamental and we need to spread that. Second problem that we have, of course, is we have a collection problem. We're not collecting a lot of the plastic we produce. Even when there is good collection system, the leakage is still unacceptable. We're talking about 10%, 25%, even in European Union level. Second problem, so investing in infrastructure for collection and systems, city level, government level, jurisdictional level, fundamental. Third problem is recycling issue. Yeah. Too little plastic is recyclable, not just recycled, but even recyclable. Yeah, 14% on average, but a lot of the plastic we produce, it just cannot be recycled, even if you have facilities, even if you have collection.
You can't do
it. And it's about design of the products, that of course. And there are many initiatives now at the sector level to address some of these issues. The last point that maybe we capitalize later, there's another outrage about the whole thing of plastic, which is 20% of the ocean plastic comes from ocean industries. Oh. How crazy is that? People that make their living, fishing and other things. Yeah. People that make their living industry, that depend on the health of the ocean, they dump 20% of the global plastic pollution in the ocean. And that's something that I think the industry should reflect on.
Marco, you have very clearly and emphatically pointed out the problems we have. Your Serene Highness, your foundation does incredible work in these areas. What do you think is the biggest challenge, and at what cost? What is the human cost if we don't do something?
Well, I think the human cost will be mostly in health. Human health, as I said, we know that microplastics have entered already into the food chain, and we don't know the long-term effects on all of us for ingesting, when eating seafood products, when we talk about that alone. We simply don't know what the long-term effects are. And so if it becomes a major health major public health issue, then we have serious problems. But I think
Beatrice, of course, from the more practical level, what is Coca-Cola doing? I know that you have initiatives, and where do you see it going? What does the future look like in terms of consumers when they are buying Coca-Cola?
Well, we have to, so back to the producer question, we have to eliminate single-use plastics, full stop. They should not exist. And so it's important for producers to step up and take responsibility. And our chairman, chairman-elect, he'll be chairman in April, and CEO, he set a goal last year around creating a world without waste.
Did.
And he committed to collect 100% of our packaging that we put out in the marketplace. But he didn't stop there. And so back to designing in solutions, we have to design in new materials. And so we just recently opened up all of our intellectual property on our plant bottle because we know that that also has a benefit to reduce carbon. And so we said, well, let's open that up because we created this, but we're keeping it for ourselves. We need the world to have access to it. We also know that's not enough. We have to collect the bottles and put them back into bottles. So today in 4 countries, and we know this can be done, we have 100% of our water bottles made out of recycled PET, 100%. And so it can be done. You need infrastructure. You need to be able to collect the material. We need the partnership with the government.
That costs money. Are they willing to spend?
Well, it costs money, but so what's the cost of not doing this? We have to spend the money. We have to get this right because the cost of not doing this is too great.
But will all businesses agree if their profit margins might not be helpful?
Well, I think so, and I'll give credit over here to our friends from Dow. So part of what WEF created is the Global Partnership for Action, so our Global Plastics Action Partnership. And Dow, Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, as well as other governments, the UK government, Canadian government, I'm sure I'm leaving some out, have joined this partnership because we see it as a collective action that we need to take. We all have to take our fair share of the responsibility and create our actions. Also, this issue is so great, we cannot do this by ourselves. To truly drive the scale of the solution, we have to have the programs to pull the waste out of the oceans. We have to then prevent it from even getting there in the first place. And then we have to innovate in design and materials. What if at some point there's packageless solutions? What if we actually go beyond eliminating single-use plastics, but say, how can we actually create a world where you don't need packaging? Could exist. So there's things that we have to do beyond, but the partnerships really matter. And holding yourself accountable and publicly sharing where you are against the journey. And so we've also opened up our data. And we said, we're going to tell people where we are, where we need to improve. We know we need to improve and how much further we have to go.
So transparency is a big part of everything.
Huge part of this.
Do you agree with that, Diego? And collaboration and partnerships being so key in this fight to end plastic pollution, turn the tap.
Very much, very much. And this is my first Davos.
Welcome.
Thank you. And since
Hopefully
Monday,
not your last after this discussion.
since Monday, I've been in so many discussions, and I see the engagement across the whole spectrum of government communities. We saw the Chinese government here. We saw the Vietnamese, Indonesian. We saw partners. So the action is here. The emergency is here. None of us like the ocean being polluted. That is a fact. Dow is engaging with many organizations, but particularly last week we launched the Global Alliance to End Plastic Waste in London with a commitment of $1.5 billion with 30 companies. And the key is not the number of the money, I think is the components of it. And the first one is infrastructure. And here we talk a lot about that recycling is possible or not possible, but when you look at right here where we're sitting in Switzerland, and Central and Northern Europe recycles 100%. So it is possible, the equipment is there, the technology exists, and we need to take these technologies over to the 10 countries or 5 countries and 10 rivers where we have a problem, and guide ourselves there. That's why the Alliance includes everybody in the value chain, from brand owners to recycling and collection companies. If we leave them out, we leave a big component of how to solve the problem. Eliminating could sound interesting, but you could be creating more trash and more disposable in another front. So we believe in an integrated approach, and we do want to focus on the 5 countries and 10 rivers where the huge leakage is. And with the Alliance and the focus that I see in Davos is amazing. We will solve this problem.
By when?
We have to start soon. You know, I come from Brazil, and when I grew up, we had, unfortunately, the worst polluted city in the world was called Cubatão, right off São Paulo. And you go there today, and they won several United Nations awards of the best sustainable city. So I'm an optimist. When the world comes together to solve something, I've seen in my life that we can solve the problem.
You need the world to come together. You need the political will, and you need the will of leaders around the world. And this is where I'd like to ask you, Prune. The G7 has obviously set ambitious plans for tackling plastics in oceans, but how can the plans be taken forward under France's leadership?
So we want to do several things. So in case some people in the room don't know, France is going to be hosting the G7. We've just started our presidency, as we say. And we want to put fighting plastic pollution at the center, or as a key part of the G7. We want the G7 to deliver something to people. As I've said before, one of the problems with the G7 initiatives like this is that they don't really deliver much concretely. And so that's also why some people become cynical, and they basically stop believing in international collaboration, and even in collaboration sometimes between different stakeholders. And we want to show that it's possible and that we can deliver. And one of the sort of issues that we think is really ripe is the issue of plastic pollution. So we want to do it two ways, by first making sure that heads of state actually grasp and tackle the issue and talk about it. But we also want to make it concrete by bringing together under the umbrella and within the framework of the One Planet Summit, which is a summit that was launched by President Macron when President Trump decided to leave the Paris Agreement, that gathers all the people who actually, and organizations who actually do things. Because the best way of keeping the Paris Agreement alive is actually to make it happen, to implement it. And so we want to bring on board a coalition of different stakeholders that represent about 20 to 25% of a market to fight and to be on board and to fight plastic pollution. Because we believe that if you get 20% of a market that is actually fighting against plastic pollution, then the rest, the rest of the stakeholders, the 80% who are not part of the coalition, you can shame them. And if they're not in it, it means they actively choose to be out of it, first. And second, if you get 20% of a market that is involved, then it means you show also to regulators that companies, our companies and NGOs and everybody, citizens, are ready for more ambitious regulation, and that governments have no excuse if they don't regulate. So that's what we want to show, and so we're going to have a coalition on plastic pollution, but also on overfishing and a host of other issues.
Brune, you were just saying, of course, that President Trump took the US out of the Paris Climate Accord agreement.
Yes.
How damaging is that when a superpower, the leaders, obviously the administration, are skeptical about climate change and including plastic pollution?
Well, I have no words. I think it's absolutely terrible. I think it sends the wrong message. I think it's wrong. But I also think...
But you need them, to have that political will, to have the superpower. How do you persuade them to come on board?
Yeah, I'd also say, if I could add in, I think then business has to step in where those things happen. I mean, I remember we got the call. We were asked, I had been in Paris, and I was asked, so does that mean Coke being headquartered in the US is going to give up on climate? We said, absolutely not. This is core to our values and work that has to be done. And we went ahead and made sure people understood our goals and our commitment. And so you can see that the US companies who stayed in wrote an open letter to President Trump, and Coca-Cola was a part of that. And we put them on notice, and we said, we believe that we need to be in, and so we're going to keep doing this work, and we expect the governments to do it. Now, we didn't get a response, but it was an open letter, so.
But I think there are enough governors in the United States that did sign.
Yes,
So
but
There was
that's
the
right,
famous,
Mark.
Yeah, and mayors of
the
the
famous
companies, the
hashtag,
states.
the famous
Yes.
hashtag, we are still in. We are still
Yes.
We're
in.
part of the
That's
world.
right.
We're part of the solution,
Yes.
and we understand.
However, I just want to make the discussion a little bit. Diego, I heard maybe I've misunderstood your previous statistics, but when you said 100% of plastic is recycled in Europe, it's not.
Not in Europe.
Okay.
In Central and Northern Europe.
But even in Switzerland,
it's
but
not
even in
even-
Switzerland, it's not. I mean, I live in Switzerland, and a lot of the plastic that is collected here is actually incinerated because it's not recyclable or because there are not enough facilities. And so the reality is much darker, I think. Yeah.
But Marco, we're talking about turning off the plastic pollution, but what about the plastic that's already there? How do we solve that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a significant issue. Obviously, we have to work on different fronts, right? The plastic issue is so complex. It's about design, it's about collecting, it's about recycling, it's about reduction, I stress. Daniela mentioned earlier, is about alternatives. This reminds me a little bit also of the discussion that, and I know this is controversial, forgive me, but the discussion that we had 10 years ago, maybe 15, around renewable energy and fossil fuels. At that time, everybody was saying in the audience, we need to, increase efficiency, cleaner fuel, clean coal, all that kind of stuff. No, we have to move to renewable energy. Yeah. And this is where I think the analogy here with plastic is, at some point, we have to begin to invest in alternative technologies, alternative polymers, and we can make it because technology has those solutions already to some extent. Not at scale, but they can be deployed at scale if we want. So we would expect that to be also a track of significant investment and conversation. Alternatives, get out of plastic. We're going to get out of fossil fuel, we get out of plastic as well, because they all come from the same thing, oil underground.
But I think, if I may, I think we need to go beyond that as also.
Even more.
Honestly, because yes, alternatives are important, but I think we also need to change our behaviors.
Yeah, sure.
I don't
it's
believe
key.
I do not believe in replacing everything with an alternative. Because sometimes we don't know whether the alternative will work, and it could potentially be even worse. I don't know, I'm not sure. But in France, that's what we did. We banned single-use plastic bags, and we decided to go for an alternative, especially if you buy vegetables and fruits and stuff like that, because we thought it was compostable.
Sure.
But it wasn't. And so, it becomes a problem in our whole system. So I think we also need very strongly, very deeply to change our behavior. And I was very hopeful and very happy that you said that we could potentially live in a world which is free of clearly free of plastics, but also free of packaging.
Your Serene Highness, you've heard Brune say we need to change behavior. How do you feel we can change the hearts and minds of people?
Well, just by trying to make them part of the solution, that everyone, even doing small actions every day and changing their behavior slightly and showing them how to change their behavior. But if they don't feel part of the solution, maybe they won't adhere to it and they won't be advocates for it. So it's all small steps and trying to show them that there are alternative ways of using, in this case, of using plastic or not using plastic, using the already available alternatives, but other steps that they can take in their everyday lives to reduce their waste, to reduce their use of energy, or to use it more wisely. It's all by these little examples and by these little steps that we can move forward.
Because it does seem overwhelming to a lot of individuals around the world. They hear these statistics, they have these headlines, the emergency, it's a global crisis, plastic pollution, and all these headlines. But for individuals, it can feel, what can they do? And can they do something?
Besides all the investments, the partnerships, everything that we already mentioned with Coca-Cola and the organizations, the last year in particular, our team was thinking, how do we engage our team? We're a company of about 50,000 employees. If we can't mobilize our employees Do we have something? And we put together a program to basically go out and clean the environment, which is called #Pulling Our Weight. We thought we're going to get a few locations, a few people, for a month and a half. We would start where we have big locations, US, Europe, a few in Latin America. And at the end of the program, we covered 57 locations around the world, all over the world. 5,700 employees and family members took their weekends or their personal time to go out and clean. And once you clean, you see what's there, and then you emotionally feel it. What is the problem? What is it? So when we're trying to create policies, discussions, engagements, we are a lot closer to it. I went there, our CEO was there as well. We're doing more this year. We want to expand this collection across multiple sectors. We don't need to be just Dow, because we didn't put the name Dow in it, because we believe that this is a movement that we can create. So it's doable. People come back very different. So if you're closer to where the problem is, particularly in Asia, a lot of our employees in Asia were overwhelmed, and now we're expanding our partnerships there on collecting and seeing how do we get one beach at a time clean.
Diego, it sounds optimistic. It sounds like you feel, from seeing on the ground, you're moving in the right direction. But we do live in a very conflicted world, chaotic world. There's a lot of geopolitical problems that we have. And, you said you come from Brazil. You have a lot of poverty, you have the favelas. So for people that you're trying to tell, don't use this or don't use that, but they could be looking at different kind of problems, and also you have a lot of conflict in different parts of the world. How do you keep oceans, climate change, the end of plastic pollution at the top of the agenda?
Well, and if I can add in, it's an economic story. In a lot of those places, actually, we have a program in Brazil called Colectivo, and it's an income stream for the collectors there. But what was happening is that informal collection system didn't have a place to sell it for a very long time, or there were health hazards because maybe they were collecting it but not using masks, gloves, or protection for themselves. And so it was interesting because we worked with the government there to actually create these programs, and it's one of the most successful recycling initiatives we have, but not because of us. It's actually because it created jobs, it created an income stream. There's this lady named Regina who works up in the favela who is a part of this journey. She started with one facility where she would sell it in the aftermarket. Whatever was left, she'd work with artisans to create jewelry. We talked to her about how could we help her expand and bring people in. She employs today 700 people. That's 700 families that she's positively impacted. And it's Regina's story and the Brazilian story for us. But the most amazing thing, where they operate, those are the cleanest favelas I've ever seen. And they're able to put food on the table, and their kids are seeing a different future. So there's solutions that can be done.
Yes.
And you have to make sure you go in and cut. It's not a one-size-fits-all. I'm learning on my own journey. You have to look at each country, each community, each culture, and figure out what do they need most, and how can you bring the resources to the table to build it in.
Marco, how can
Yeah, I just wanted to add, there is also this specific issue of ready-made microplastic, because we think of microplastic as the big plastic breaking down in the ocean, but there are actually a lot of microplastic going straight as micro in the ocean. And the more we look into this, the more we discover amazing things like synthetic fibers in our clothing. Every time you wash it, thousands of microplastic particles goes straight into the ocean. And there is no system that could actually at that point collect it.
We want to work on that.
Yeah.
As part of the One Planet.
I was going to say.
Develop a standard for washing machines.
Exactly.
You just need to add a filter. I mean, it's no...
There is a technical solution, very specific.
Typically an outcome,
very
one
specific,
of the outcomes we want.
very handy, and actually that could be promoting economic development as well, and new business and new opportunities. It's again a technology evolution like we've seen for fossil fuel to clean energy. This is a similar thing.
Talking about revolutions, of course, we have the fourth industrial revolution with technology. How can tech help?
Well, this is a
Yes.
case. The washing machine that trapped the microplastic at source.
Yes.
That's definitely one example.
Even more, Diego.
There is
than that.
technology being developed in all fronts, from improving recyclability, designs with brand owners. How do you change the feedstock of the plastic that it becomes different than what it is today? Technology is expanding in a very high speed because of what we are living, right? So again, I believe that technology is great. We want to go beyond into this new world of very different circularity.
Yes.
I would just caution ourselves that go to the Philippines, go to Indonesia, and live their trajectory from where they are today to where you want. But we need to first stop the leakage. And stop the leakage is not creating more leakage of other things. If they don't have infrastructure to collect, if they don't have infrastructure to recycle even plastic, paper, or anything, we're ignoring the problem of there is a waste problem, not a plastic problem. Plastic is one of the components of the trash. So yes, we want to go beyond of where the new society will go, but I'd say the 5 countries and the 10 rivers have a very cruel reality that we have to, the solutions are here in the Western world. The technologies exist. That's why we, in our partnership in the Alliance, we brought Suez and Veolia, which are recycling companies, which are collecting companies that they know, okay, how do we create the systems there? Once you have the systems, then you can evolve into the next generation of whatever we want to create to improve the circularity. But without that, we're looking at ourselves here versus looking at the issue that is polluting the ocean. The theme of today is ocean, not just what's the Western world problem, is the ocean. And the ocean today is being attacked and polluted by very specific situations. Let's attack those first.
Thank you so much. Please join me, ladies and gentlemen, in welcoming my distinguished panel. Thank you so much. That's all for this episode. I'm Tania Bryer. Thank you for watching.